I didn't realize the feeling of freedom that I would have and like healing. I think healing's a journey. I don't think anybody's ever like 100%, right? Like we're all
Right.
just going and like, I didn't know I could reach this level.
Hello and welcome. Today I have Norma Buster. Norma is the Chief of Staff at CA Goldberg, which is a victims' rights law firm in Brooklyn, New York, where she was once a client dealing with stalking and image-based sexual abuse. Norma is a sex-positive victims' rights advocate who's met with thousands of survivors. She's an online sex worker and the creator and host of Oral Arguments, a podcast about sex, tech, and victims' rights. Welcome, Norma.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Norma and I met at the Sexual Health Alliance conference, and it was so great to meet somebody who's really defending the rights of those people whose voices are often not heard, especially in this industry. So briefly tell us how you ended up doing this work. I think it's one of these cautionary tales that led to a really great outcome, and I love that.
Yeah. When I was 19 years old, I broke up with my ex-boyfriend of 2 years and just wanting to be on my own. And he did not take the breakup well. He started stalking me for months, telling me lies about tragedies happening in his family, threatening suicide,
Mm.
and then finally threatening me with my naked images that he had that I had shared with him throughout the relationship, expecting them to be private. And then finally, he did actually post my images on the internet. By the time he posted them, it was like early 2015. I was living in New Jersey, which was one of 3 states with a law criminalizing the non-consensual dissemination of intimate images. And I was still turned away by police. To make a long story short, my mom found this lawyer, CA Goldberg, and Carrie was one of the only people at the time speaking about this thing called revenge porn that we used to call it. Now we say image-based sexual abuse. So at the time, she's one of the only people talking about it. And she wound up helping me so that we were able to get a criminal investigation open, like on the county level. And I was able to get a final restraining order with her help. I knew that after what I went through that I wanted to turn it into something more powerful, like use my story for something. But my ex had been threatening me for months. I mean, he was on Twitter saying, "You'll be lucky to work at McDonald's after this. Shit spreads quickly." Just like tweeting publicly about this. And like he basically made a Pornhub profile with my full name and phone number, address, and everything.
Wow.
Yeah, so I didn't really have to argue as much that like I didn't want that to be out there. However, I will say when I went to the police and when I first found the images, I was put on the phone with my town judge because they said like you can try to get a restraining order against your ex. We don't know what to do, but maybe you could get a restraining order. So they put me on the phone with her and she told me this is why we don't send pictures. When you send pictures to one person, it's like asking for it to be on a billboard. And she said, we don't
Thanks,
know.
Mom.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mom,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. We don't know that it was him. So I was experiencing that from the first moment. And then when Carrie like went with us back to police, they were basically saying like I needed to find proof it was my ex. I'm like, I don't know what more proof you want other than like a full confession. So yeah, I think once we like kind of took it out of the local police hands and like got it to the county level, we were able to get somewhere. And then it was a matter of like getting subpoenas so that the companies involved, like Pornhub, would have to send.
Take it down.
Well, they actually took it down immediately after I reported it.
So how do you when you know like you and I, because of the work of the education and the world that we've been working in the sexuality field, we're not fazed by the word sex work, and we don't automatically assume that somebody's a hooker because we say the word sex work. So what would be some examples, and then how could someone who willingly puts themselves out there to perform a sex act for money willingly, how do they get to argue then? And I'm just being devil's advocate here that, well, you put yourself out there, like now you're saying that this was not consensual.
Yeah, because I think that there's not a baseline like understanding or respect for consent. Like people talk about consent, but when you push like what does that actually mean to you? I think that for many people it's limited, right? So it's like I say, we need image-based abuse laws to be inclusive of protecting sex workers. And I'll explain what that even means.
Especially
So
because sex work is not legal in most of the United States. In some places it's legal, but it's in most of the United States
yeah,
it's not. So that alone, it's like the cannabis industry. That alone makes it difficult to protect,
right.
right?
So that, well, full service sex work, right? So sex work, I'll just say it's an umbrella term. So
Okay.
full service sex work, also known as prostitution, would be getting paid to have sex, right?
Mhm.
Straightforward. But then you have online sex work, like OnlyFans, or people who do porn, right? They could be doing it on their own, or it could be with a big production company, or you could be a stripper, or you could be an escort. And maybe sex isn't guaranteed. It's not like so straightforward that it's a transaction of sex for money. It's time for money, and maybe if the escort feels comfortable, maybe there will be sex. So I just want to like first establish that, right? That like sex work is just, it's selling some sort of sexual experience, whatever that is.
I just wanted to take a quick break to ask you if you're enjoying the show, why not hit the subscribe button? That makes sure that you're notified every time a new episode comes out and when the bonus episodes come out. And if you really want, you can head over to my website and pick up a copy of Your Pleasure Playbook. Now, let's get back to the show.
I just spoke to someone who you know as well the other day who does escort work, private escort work, and she just decided that she wants to do it, and she makes a lot of money at it, and she's enjoyed it. And so I think, yeah, I mean, it's decriminalized theoretically in the Netherlands and parts of Germany, and I think in Nevada there's certain counties, right, where
It's legalized, but that's not what sex workers want. So certain counties have legalized sex work. The problem is there. So what they've done is they have just created new rules for how sex work is supposed to be performed. So anybody who's doing sex work outside of that very limited set of rules is doing it illegally, which means that they're even more vulnerable. So the people who become the most vulnerable in those situations are undocumented sex workers, because they will never be able to do legal sex work if they're undocumented. And
interesting.
it's just like it's creating new hoops for people to go through. It's creating new barriers that just keep people in the criminal space. So sex workers do not want legalization. They want decriminalization.
Criminals.
Just take the criminalization out of exchanging sex for money.
Interesting. I mean, there's always going to be bad players, even if for people who,
Yeah.
they're going to be people that are coerced. It's just,
Yeah.
it's going to happen. Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. So now let's switch gears a little bit. So I love your story because you've taken, what is it? Lemons and made it into lemonade, and literally lemonade. So
Yeah.
talk to us. You mentioned OnlyFans, and I know that is somewhere where you have now been doing some content. And start by, for the ignorant audience like me, explaining, we might have all heard of it, but we don't necessarily know what it is and how it's different from a Pornhub or some other porn site.
Yeah, so it is website for online sex work. So, and I guess not everybody sells sexy content, but for the most part, that's what it's for. You can subscribe to a content creator that you like, and then get access to their page. So like my OnlyFans profile is hidden behind a paywall. And I post regularly images and little video clips on my wall. So it's kind of like another form of social media, but it's a lot sexier and it's behind a paywall. So the expectation is that people do not share this content outside of that paywall. And I put that in my bio as like a very, very clear disclaimer. I own all these images. You don't have permission to share it with anybody else. And so people pay a monthly subscription to get access to my page, and they'll also pay for content that I send. So I'll sell like lingerie shoots, or like I do implied nudes. And people
What does that
buy,
mean?
it's like I'm fully nude, but you won't see everything full frontal. It's like I'm
Okay.
covering.
Okay.
It's like teasing content. That's like kind of my niche. And like I'll also do custom. So sometimes guys want a dick rating where like they'll
Dick
send me
reading?
rating.
Rating. Okay. Okay. Oh,
Yeah,
how do
so
you rate it?
they'll like,
How do you rate it? I love it.
I love talking about this. It's so much fun. So they'll send me a dick pic. And then they'll pay for either like a simple or like a paragraph or a voice note or a video where I am giving them a rating 1 to 10 of their dick. And depending on like which kind of rating they buy, like I would
Uh-huh.
go into more detail about what I think about it. And I ask them like if they want to be praised or if they want an honest review or a degrading review, because some people have that kink. Um, and so that's a fun one because now when I get unsolicited dick pics, I just say like you have to send money to for me to open that.
So you actually talk to people one-on-one on
Yeah,
the app.
yeah, that's actually a big part, I would say, of OnlyFans and like the appeal is that you're messaging back and forth with like the person that you are subscribed to. So yeah, I have conversations with them. Sometimes they'll tell me that like they found me through like the work I do, which I always really, really appreciate. Like that makes me feel so good to know that even though they're subscribing for like sexual content, that they are here because they see me as a full human being and they see everything I'm doing. I've had subscribers who told me that they listen to my podcast, and that's really cool too. So yeah, it's fun.
Would love to understand how you went from being sort of abused in this world
Mhm.
to becoming actually a sex worker. And what I find really interesting, and this is something that I've learned through my education over the last year, I made certain assumptions and judgments that anyone who does this kind of work had to have been abused somewhere along the line, which I now learn is not the case at all. It's not the case with kink and it's not the case with sex work. But in your case, there may or may not be a correlation.
Yeah, and like to be honest, that was the thing that I was nervous about, was like that I knew that a lot of people have that idea and I don't like I didn't want to like reinforce the stereotype or for people to take it as that. But I mean, I hadn't even like considered it for myself. I hadn't even like given myself the option to think about it. It was kind of this like fantasy, like, oh, well, in another life, like maybe I would have. But then I started getting more involved in like sex workers' rights and meeting more sex work people who are doing all different forms of sex work and just like getting more exposed to it and like learning more about it and learning like what rights people needed and the issues that sex workers are facing and really seeing it as like parallel to everything that I deal with, and that I've been through personally and that I see at the firm, whether it's like the sex workers that we work with or the non-sex workers. Like I didn't realize the feeling of freedom that I would have and like healing because I think healing's a journey. I don't think anybody's ever like 100%, right? Like we're all
Right.
just going and like I didn't know I could reach this level.
Great. That's great. How does it impact your relationships? Like, are you able to have committed or if you want them? You said you had been in a throuple. Like, would you like what's your
Committed. I
you
do.
may not want that. I mean, I'm
No,
putting my
no.
judgment on, you know.
Yeah. Well, I've dated couples. I wouldn't say I've been in a throuple. But I've had relationships like where we weren't calling each other boyfriend and girlfriend, but like we're dating. But I've been like officially single for 10 years now. So that's like still like I definitely have commitment issues, especially after being stalked. The stalking in particular, that feeling of like not being left alone
Right.
and having my agency respected, that really made me feel like any relationship would be suffocating.
Mm.
And I've done so much therapy and like also dating couples kind of helped with that, which that could be a whole other podcast episode.
Yes, definitely, definitely.
Yeah, and I found a lot of healing through that. And it's funny, I think in some ways, part of me has held back on dating new people a little bit because I like don't even want to deal with the conversation of like, when do I bring up the OnlyFans, or like when, I don't know. But for the most part, what I have enjoyed is that it's a really good filtering system. And so when I hear from people I date that they think it's really cool, the work I do, and that I do the OnlyFans and all of that, like that just says a lot more to me. And it means a lot. It makes me feel like more understood and comfortable, and seeing if somebody can see what I'm doing and like be like, that's great.
Yeah. And that's a job, in
Yeah.
a way. It's like that's some of your work. It's not
Oh
necessarily who
yeah.
you are, right? So that's great.
Right. Right. And but it is like very closely tied to who I am. Like at my personal and professional life are so intertwined, like I can't really separate it. Even though I do have like very clear separations in terms of the sex work and my like law firm work.
Right, right, right. Interesting, interesting. This has been fascinating. Really, really, really interesting. Before you tell people where to find you, anything else you want to add?
Ooh, I don't think so. Like now I'm
Okay.
nervous, so like I don't know. But yeah, my podcast will be coming back very soon. The new season will be up. It's Oral Arguments. You can find it wherever you listen to podcasts.
And I will, by the time this comes out, I think January, I'll link to it. And then I'm going to ask you my final question, which I ask all my guests, which is, what is your definition of sex?
I think it is any exchange of erotic pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I love this. And I'm going to take you up on that other episode. I think it'll be a really, really fun one
That
to
would be
do.
great.
And Norma, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me at Norma Buster anywhere. I'm Norma Buster _ on Instagram. Our law firm is CA Goldberg Law if you want to find out more about our work, or if you need legal help as well.
Great. And all those links will be in the show notes. It was great to see you. Thank you so much, Norma.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, follow, and review the podcast wherever you listen. And go ahead and share it with a friend or a partner and make the world a more sex positive place.